King Charles in shock after his secret son with Queen Camilla provides DNA result to prove King Charles must be his biological father and he's the true first son on the royal family. Welcome viewers to my channel. Please subscribe, like my video and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next update. For those outside the gilded gates of Buckingham Palace and the ornate walls of Clarence House, the royal family appears as a seamless institution of tradition, poise, and public service. Every appearance is choreographed, every word measured, and every gesture captured by a world eager to witness the lives of a monarchy seemingly untouched by the complexities that define ordinary families. But behind those polished facades lies a web of relationships, rivalries, and unspoken tensions that rarely reach public view. This was the world into which King Charles had been born, a realm of immense privilege shadowed by scrutiny and expectation. It is within this realm that the seeds of secrets, whispers, and hidden truths take root, quietly, subtly, but persistently, waiting for a moment to emerge. Charles's early life was shaped by duty and observation. He was the eldest son of Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip, heir apparent from birth, burdened with the knowledge that his life would never be solely his own. The weight of the crown was more than an inheritance. It was an ever-present responsibility that dictated behavior, alliances, and even personal relationships. The palace was both home and stage, a place where the private and public collided with little regard for personal freedom. In this environment, every action carried significance, and every secret had the potential to explode into scandal. From a young age, Charles learned to navigate these waters with caution, diplomacy, and an understanding of the delicate balance that defined royal life. Camilla, whose presence in the royal orbit would later become one of the most scrutinized and controversial, played a role in this complex ecosystem in ways that were often overlooked. Initially an outsider, her life intersected with Charles's in moments that were private yet consequential. She moved through a world where appearances mattered above all else, where alliances were tentative, and where every decision could have lasting consequences. Behind closed doors, she observed and participated in the subtle negotiations of power, love, and loyalty that define families whose lives are constantly on display. Her eventual marriage to Charles was not just a union of affection, it was a joining of histories, secrets, and ambitions that would influence generations. The dynamics within the royal family were never simple. Beyond the public image of unity and harmony, there existed tensions, rivalries, and competing narratives. Relationships were carefully managed, yet emotions remained human, unpredictable, and occasionally raw. Charles's siblings, each navigating their own positions within the hierarchy, contributed to a climate in which loyalty and caution often collided. In a family where protocol often dictated action more than personal desire, the private moments carried immense weight. Decisions about marriages, births, and alliances were not merely personal, they had implications for the institution, the public, and history itself. Within this context, the emergence of a secret child, previously unacknowledged and hidden from the public eye, represented more than a personal revelation, it was a disruption of decades of carefully maintained order. Palace staff, often overlooked in public narratives, held an intimate understanding of the family's rhythms and unspoken rules. From the butlers who observed daily routines to the advisors who guided decisions with strategic precision, these individuals occupied a delicate position between loyalty and discretion. They saw what the public could not, heard what was whispered behind closed doors, and often acted as the first line of judgment and counsel when crises arose. The arrival of news about a potential secret son would ripple through this network of confidants, creating a mixture of intrigue, fear, and anticipation. For them, the revelation was not just sensational, it was operational, affecting everything from security to protocol, communication, and internal politics. History itself had conditioned the royal family to expect the unexpected. Scandals, rumors, and clandestine affairs were not unheard of. They were part of a larger tapestry that chronicled the humanity beneath the monarchy's polished exterior. Yet each revelation carried its own consequences. While some events had been absorbed and managed, others had left indelible marks, shaping behavior, policy, and relationships for decades. The prospect of a secret son threatened to enter this lineage of consequence, adding a new chapter to a history defined by both reverence and controversy. King Charles's perspective on family was shaped by these layers of expectation. He was a man accustomed to performing under pressure, to maintaining composure in the face of scrutiny, and to prioritizing duty over desire. Yet personal emotions, love, regret, hope, were never absent, only carefully managed. The announcement of a hidden child forced him to confront these emotions in a way he had not anticipated. The private nature of grief, surprise, or doubt now intersected with a public reality that demanded transparency, explanation, and management. His response, therefore, would be both deeply personal and profoundly consequential for the institution he represented. In this complex environment, the notion of legitimacy carried immense weight. Bloodlines, inheritance, and public perception are not abstract concepts in a monarchy, they are the very framework upon which authority rests. The revelation of a secret son not only challenged these frameworks but also posed existential questions about identity, lineage, and power. How could a monarchy reconcile the existence of an undisclosed heir with the carefully structured hierarchy that had persisted for centuries? What obligations, if any, did Charles have to recognize this son, and how would such recognition alter the perception of the royal family in the eyes of the public and the world? These were questions that reached far beyond individual sentiment, touching on governance, history, and the very nature of monarchy itself. The emotional landscape of the family was equally complex. For Camilla, navigating the revelation meant confronting her own past, choices made under pressure, and the long-held secret she had carried. For the secret son, it was a moment of both validation and vulnerability. For Charles, it was a collision between identity, duty, and human emotion. Every member of the inner circle, siblings, children, advisors, was caught in the tension between familial loyalty and institutional responsibility. The palace, often seen as a symbol of stability and permanence, became a stage for uncertainty, introspection, and high-stakes decision-making. Beyond the walls of the palace, public perception and media scrutiny loomed large. Every rumor, every leak, and every revelation had the potential to dominate headlines, influence opinion, and shape history. The monarchy's survival as an institution often depended on carefully balancing transparency with discretion, reality with narrative, and emotion with strategy. The existence of a secret son represented the ultimate test of this balance, challenging not only the family's internal dynamics but also the broader cultural understanding of monarchy, legacy, and personal truth. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test the limits of secrecy, loyalty, and human emotion. In the coming days, weeks, and months, the royal family would have to navigate the turbulent waters of revelation, negotiation, and adjustment. The emergence of a secret son was not merely a matter of personal or family drama, it was a historic event, a catalyst for change, and a story that demanded careful consideration of both human and institutional consequences. Within these walls, behind the polished facades and carefully scripted appearances, the royal family confronted the reality that the past, no matter how carefully concealed, has a way of resurfacing with consequences that are both profound and irreversible. The chapter closes with an understanding that while the public may see a family of tradition and stability, the reality is far more intricate. Secrets linger, choices have lasting consequences, and human emotion can never be fully controlled, even within the most disciplined and scrutinized of families. The arrival of a secret son serves as a reminder that monarchy is not just about protocol or pageantry, it is about the people who live within its walls, their histories, their mistakes, and their capacity for both courage and vulnerability. The narrative is only beginning, and the journey into the heart of this revelation promises to reveal truths that are as human as they are historic. Every great story has a beginning shrouded in mystery, and the emergence of King Charles's secret son was no exception. The tale begins in the quiet corners of history, in moments long concealed from public view, where whispers of unusual circumstances and hidden connections existed but were never acknowledged. The very notion of a royal child born in secrecy challenges conventional understanding of monarchy, legacy, and familial loyalty. Yet here, in this shadowed narrative, lay the truth that had been carefully safeguarded for decades, waiting for the moment when it could finally be unveiled. The secret son's birth did not take place under the public scrutiny typical of royal announcements. There were no jubilant headlines, no ceremonial declarations, no documented celebrations. Instead, it was a quiet, private event, deliberately removed from the gaze of the world. This isolation was both intentional and necessary, dictated by the intersecting priorities of discretion, security, and emotional protection. Those closest to the situation recognized the stakes involved, Revealing such a birth could have disrupted not only the family's public image but also the internal balance of relationships and loyalties that had been cultivated over generations. Camilla, at the center of this narrative, played a pivotal yet complex role. Her actions were guided by a mixture of affection, duty, and strategic awareness. Concealing a child from the world, and even from key members of the family, was not a decision made lightly. It required planning, coordination, and careful management of perceptions. While the public may have perceived her as a figure of grace, poise, and consistency, the reality behind closed doors was far more intricate. She had to navigate the emotions of the child, the implications for Charles, and the potential fallout for the monarchy itself. Every decision carried emotional weight, every omission had consequences, and every interaction was calculated to maintain a delicate equilibrium. The early life of the secret son was one of isolation and observation. From infancy, he was aware, if only subtly, that his existence was different, that his life was partially hidden from the world that most children took for granted. Guardians and caregivers worked to balance protection with normalcy, allowing him to experience aspects of childhood while simultaneously shielding him from attention and curiosity that might expose his origins. This duality shaped his emotional development, instilling a profound understanding of secrecy, discretion, and the fragile nature of trust. The child grew up learning that the truth could be both liberating and dangerous, a lesson that would resonate for years to come. As he matured, the secret son began to notice the patterns of life around him, the careful avoidance of certain subjects, the subtle changes in behavior when certain names were mentioned, and the pervasive sense that his existence was both acknowledged and deliberately minimized. These observations, though often subconscious, planted the seeds of curiosity, identity, and eventual determination to uncover his true lineage. Every whispered remark, every avoided question, every carefully managed interaction contributed to the development of an awareness that he was connected to something larger than himself, something hidden yet significant. The dynamics between the secret son and those who guided him were delicate. Caregivers, advisors, and confidants understood the importance of fostering resilience, emotional intelligence, and adaptability. Yet they also recognized that the eventual revelation of his lineage would be a seismic event in his life, requiring preparation and careful management. The tension between nurturing a sense of normalcy and preparing for an extraordinary truth created an emotional landscape that was both complex and fragile. In many ways, his early years were a training ground, equipping him to navigate a world that would one day demand courage, composure, and emotional fortitude. Within the broader context of the royal family, the existence of a hidden child was a silent anomaly. Protocol, tradition, and lineage were the pillars upon which legitimacy rested, and a secret son challenged each of these pillars simultaneously. While the public perceived a well-ordered hierarchy and predictable succession, the reality was more complicated. History had repeatedly demonstrated that the monarchy's public image often diverged sharply from private realities. Affairs, unacknowledged relationships, and hidden progeny were not unheard of, but their discovery always carried enormous consequences. In this instance, the implications were profound. The presence of a legitimate, undisclosed heir raised questions about precedence, inheritance, and the very definition of family within the royal framework. The secret son's own experiences were deeply human, shaped by the universal need for recognition, identity, and belonging. Despite the extraordinary circumstances of his birth, his emotional responses were familiar: longing for acknowledgement, fear of rejection, and curiosity about his place in the world. As he grew older, these emotions intensified, particularly as he became aware of the larger historical and familial context into which he had been born. The tension between the life he was allowed to lead and the life he might have had created an undercurrent of longing, frustration, and quiet determination. In adolescence, the need for truth became increasingly pressing. Questions that could once be deferred now demanded answers. The secret son began to investigate, piecing together fragments of information, observing patterns of behavior, and seeking confirmation of the rumors he had heard for years. Each discovery brought both clarity and anxiety, as the weight of potential confirmation carried enormous personal and public implications. The pursuit of truth was not merely an intellectual exercise, it was a journey toward self-definition, a confrontation with history, and a preparation for the emotional impact of eventual revelation. Camilla's role remained central throughout this period. Her guidance, discretion, and emotional support were essential in managing both the son's curiosity and the risks associated with exposure. Yet even with her careful stewardship, the situation was inherently precarious. The longer the secret remained, the greater the potential consequences of discovery. The challenge lay not only in managing external perceptions but also in navigating the internal emotional realities of everyone involved. The stakes were nothing short of the emotional, social, and political stability of one of the world's most visible families. The secret son's upbringing, therefore, was a study in contrasts: public invisibility coupled with private significance, ordinary experiences intertwined with extraordinary implications, and emotional resilience cultivated amidst secrecy and constraint. Every milestone, every birthday, every achievement, every personal development, was colored by the awareness that his existence was not fully recognized, that his identity was partly defined by what was hidden rather than what was openly acknowledged. This duality shaped his character, instilling a deep sense of self-reliance, strategic awareness, and emotional acuity. As the years progressed, the inevitability of revelation grew stronger. The world, the family, and the son himself were moving toward a moment of truth that could no longer be postponed. Decisions about timing, disclosure, and approach became increasingly urgent. Each conversation, each action, each observation carried weight, influencing the eventual manner in which the secret would emerge. The careful orchestration of these elements reflected both the complexity of the situation and the profound consequences awaiting those involved. In retrospect, the hidden birth and early life of King Charles's secret son were far more than personal circumstances. They were the foundation for a story that would captivate the world. It was a narrative defined by secrecy, resilience, and the tension between human emotion and institutional expectation. The careful concealment of his existence created anticipation, intrigue, and a latent drama that would erupt once the truth was finally confirmed. In this chapter of his life, the son was not just an individual discovering his identity, he was a catalyst, a symbol of the enduring tension between private truth and public perception, between human emotion and historical legacy. This chapter concludes with the understanding that the mysterious birth and hidden life of the secret son were not merely footnotes in royal history. They were the opening act of a narrative poised to challenge assumptions, redefine relationships, and confront a monarchy with a truth long concealed. The story of his early years is one of quiet endurance, careful observation, and emotional preparation, a prelude to the revelations that would soon reshape lives, legacies, and the very concept of royal identity. The phrase, growing up in the shadows, is often used metaphorically, but for King Charles's secret son, it was the literal truth of his early life. Every step he took, every milestone he achieved, was shaped by the awareness that he existed in a space deliberately removed from the world that defined his father's life. While other children of his generation moved through the public spheres of school, sport, and friendship without scrutiny, he moved cautiously, consciously navigating the invisible boundaries that dictated his interactions, his visibility, and even his sense of self. This experience was formative, shaping both character and perspective in ways that would echo through every stage of his life. From a young age, the secret son understood the delicate balance between presence and absence. Caregivers, who were both protective and pragmatic, imparted lessons that went beyond ordinary upbringing. He learned to observe, to anticipate reactions, and to interpret the subtle shifts in behavior that hinted at truth or concealment. These skills, though unusual for a child, became second nature. Where other children relied on guidance from parents, he relied on intuition, caution, and the constant assessment of circumstances. Even seemingly ordinary experiences, a birthday celebration, a casual outing, or a conversation with a relative, carried the potential for exposure, and with exposure came consequences he was too young to fully understand but instinctively avoided. School life, for instance, was an intricate dance of appearance and discretion. Enrolled in private institutions far from the media's gaze, he excelled academically and socially, but always with the understanding that his existence was delicate. Friendships were carefully chosen, interactions cautiously managed. He quickly learned that the world outside his home was not necessarily safe for someone in his position. Curiosity from peers, innocent questions, and even casual attention could pose unforeseen risks. These experiences cultivated a sense of vigilance unusual for his age, forging resilience, intelligence, and a cautious confidence that would serve him well in the years to come. Emotionally, Growing up in secrecy was both isolating and enlightening. He experienced the normal joys and frustrations of childhood, the thrill of achievement, the sting of disappointment, the exhilaration of discovery, but these emotions were tempered by the awareness that his life was different. There was a constant tension between longing for recognition and understanding the necessity of concealment. He witnessed the lives of other royal children, saw the adoration and attention lavished upon them, and sometimes felt the pang of exclusion. Yet these feelings were balanced by a quiet pride in his uniqueness, an awareness that he carried a truth that few could ever claim or understand. The secret son's relationship with Camilla was complex and layered. As a mother figure, mentor, and guardian of his secret, she embodied a blend of warmth, caution, and strategic thinking. She taught him not only about etiquette, history, and social navigation but also about the weight of secrecy and the emotional strength required to endure it. Every lesson was infused with the understanding that the world he inhabited would one day demand courage, resilience, and self-possession. Their bond was deep, rooted in shared experiences of quiet vigilance and mutual understanding, yet it was also defined by unspoken boundaries and the unacknowledged realities of their situation. Adolescence intensified the challenges of growing up in the shadows. Questions of identity, belonging, and self-definition became urgent. Who was he, and where did he truly belong? Why had the world never recognized him? These questions, often asked internally, fueled a growing desire for confirmation, clarity, and, eventually, recognition. He began to see that the life he had been allowed to live, though privileged in some ways, was incomplete, defined by what had been withheld rather than what had been given. The emotional weight of secrecy grew heavier with each passing year, and the need to uncover the truth became a defining feature of his character. Interactions with the wider world were carefully mediated. Social outings, friendships, and public events were selectively permitted and closely monitored. The secret son learned the art of observation, the ability to blend in, and the skill of remaining unseen when necessary. He became adept at reading cues, interpreting intention, and anticipating consequences. These abilities, though cultivated under unusual circumstances, were not merely survival skills, they were essential tools for navigating a life defined by partial truths and hidden realities. Education, both formal and informal, played a central role in shaping his understanding of the world and his place within it. Tutors, mentors, and advisors provided knowledge not only of academics but also of history, politics, and human behavior. Lessons extended beyond the classroom, encompassing the nuances of diplomacy, the subtleties of negotiation, and the complexities of human emotion. Each learning experience reinforced the understanding that knowledge and awareness were not luxuries, they were necessities for someone whose life intersected with one of the world's most scrutinized families. The shadowed upbringing also instilled a profound sense of empathy. Observing the lives of others from a distance, experiencing exclusion and partial truths, and understanding the weight of secrets nurtured a sensitivity to human emotion. He became attuned to the struggles of those around him, capable of perceiving unspoken tension, unexpressed grief, and hidden desires. This emotional intelligence, born of necessity, would later prove invaluable in navigating the complex relationships and high-stakes confrontations that awaited him as the truth of his parentage approached revelation. At the same time, growing up in secrecy fostered a keen sense of self-reliance. The secret son learned to trust his judgment, make independent decisions, and take responsibility for his actions without the usual safety nets of parental oversight or public validation. This independence was both a strength and a burden. While it equipped him to face the extraordinary challenges of his life, it also meant that many formative experiences were carried alone, without the shared reflection or guidance available to his peers. His resilience was hard-won, tempered by isolation, and sharpened by circumstance. The psychological complexity of his upbringing cannot be overstated. Children thrive on acknowledgement, consistency, and a sense of belonging. For him, each of these elements was present in modified forms. Acknowledgement was partial, consistency fragile, and belonging conditional. Yet within these constraints, he developed a nuanced understanding of human relationships, power, and the interplay between visibility and influence. He learned that identity could be both fluid and rooted, that personal truth could coexist with public concealment, and that resilience often emerges from the most challenging circumstances. This period of life, shadowed yet formative, set the stage for the events that would later define his adult identity. The skills, insights, and emotional maturity cultivated during these years would prove essential as he prepared to confront the most consequential truth of his life, the undeniable confirmation that King Charles was his biological father. Every experience of caution, observation, and emotional management was a rehearsal for the moment when the private would collide with the public, and when secrecy would give way to revelation. By the time adolescence was drawing to a close, the secret son had developed a remarkable combination of intelligence, empathy, and emotional resilience. He had learned to navigate a world that was simultaneously ordinary and extraordinary, to balance personal desire with caution, and to cultivate a sense of self that could withstand both recognition and rejection. The shadows of his upbringing, rather than diminishing him, had forged the character required to face the challenges ahead. He was ready, whether he fully realized it or not, to step from the periphery into the center of a story that would captivate the world and challenge the monarchy in ways no one could have anticipated. The chapter concludes with the understanding that growing up in the shadows was not merely a circumstance, it was an education, an emotional conditioning, and a crucible that prepared him for the extraordinary revelations to come. It was a period defined by observation, restraint, and emotional growth, one that would ultimately shape the way he confronted the truth of his identity and engaged with a world that had been deliberately kept at arm's length. The story of his adolescence is not just about secrecy, it is about the preparation for destiny, the forging of resilience, and the emergence of a life poised to change history. Every life, no matter how carefully guarded, eventually reaches a moment when the weight of unanswered questions becomes impossible to ignore. For King Charles's secret son, that moment arrived gradually, as fragments of memory, hints from conversations, and subtle inconsistencies in stories coalesced into a pressing need for clarity. The catalyst for seeking the truth was not a single event but a combination of circumstance, emotion, and growing self-awareness, a confluence that made it impossible to remain in the shadows any longer. From an early age, he had been aware of the gaps in his life story. While he had received affection, guidance, and education from those around him, there had always been an underlying tension, a sense that something fundamental about his identity was being withheld. He noticed the careful avoidance of certain topics, the fleeting expressions of emotion when certain names were mentioned, and the silent, almost imperceptible shifts in behavior among those closest to him. These subtle cues created a lingering curiosity, one that grew more insistent with every passing year. Adolescence and early adulthood intensified this need for answers. The secret son began to observe the wider world with an analytical eye, comparing his experiences with those of peers and families. He noticed the joy and recognition that came with parental acknowledgement, the public milestones and ceremonial validations that others took for granted, and the profound sense of identity that came with being fully known and recognized. In contrast, his own life, though secure in many ways, was defined by omissions and half-truths. Each disparity heightened his awareness of the gaps in his story and created a sense of urgency to fill them. A significant turning point came in the form of old documents and correspondence discovered during a period of personal investigation. While pursuing interests in history and genealogy, he stumbled upon letters, notes, and records that hinted at connections previously obscured. These artifacts were more than mere curiosities, they contained subtle indications of relationships, hidden alliances, and potential truths that had been deliberately concealed. Each discovery intensified his desire to uncover the reality of his origins and to reconcile the narrative he had been given with the fragments of truth he had begun to assemble. Conversations with Camilla, though careful and measured, provided additional impetus. Over the years, she had offered guidance, reassurance, and selective information, preparing him emotionally for the eventual disclosure of his lineage. Her counsel emphasized patience, strategic thinking, and emotional fortitude, but it also reinforced the notion that the truth was both attainable and necessary. She helped him understand that the pursuit of identity was not merely a personal journey but a profound engagement with history, responsibility, and legitimacy. These lessons, combined with his own observations, created the conditions for decisive action. The secret son also confronted a growing sense of mortality and urgency. Life is unpredictable, and the longer he delayed seeking confirmation, the greater the risk that critical information would be lost, memories would fade, and opportunities for resolution would diminish. This awareness of time imbued his actions with a sense of inevitability. The pursuit of truth was no longer an abstract aspiration, it had become a tangible necessity, a task that demanded courage, precision, and resolve. As he contemplated the path forward, he weighed the risks and benefits carefully. Coming forward with a claim of paternity was not merely a personal endeavor, it had profound implications for the monarchy, public perception, and historical legacy. A misstep could lead to disbelief, scandal, or outright rejection. Yet the alternative, remaining in secrecy, living a life defined by speculation and omission, was no longer acceptable. The psychological weight of uncertainty, coupled with a deep-seated need for acknowledgement, created a compelling force that could not be ignored. The decision to pursue DNA confirmation was itself a careful and deliberate process. Advances in genetic science offered the possibility of indisputable evidence, a clarity that could settle questions definitively and conclusively. The secret son understood that science could serve as an impartial arbiter in a situation fraught with emotion, history, and potential conflict. Securing a credible, verifiable DNA test became both the practical and symbolic foundation for his quest for truth. Preparation for this endeavor required meticulous planning. He had to ensure the confidentiality of the process, the reliability of the testing methods, and the legal recognition of results. Advisors, scientific experts, and legal consultants were consulted discreetly, each contributing to a strategy that balanced accuracy, discretion, and potential implications. Every detail mattered, from sample collection to chain of custody to documentation, because the stakes were extraordinary. A single misstep could undermine the entire endeavor